Hi, my name is Evelyn Carter, and 3 days before my wedding, I found out my parents wouldn't be attending, not because of an emergency, not because they couldn't get a flight, because they had booked a romantic getaway to the French Riviera. It was all confirmed in an email, first-class flights, 5 nights at a luxury spa resort, private driver, a dinner cruise, everything scheduled exactly on the weekend I was supposed to say I do. They didn't call to cancel. They didn't ask if I'd be okay. They just went. But this isn't a story about absence. It's about what came after. I had spent hours crafting the perfect seating chart. I color-coded the cards, matched napkins to centerpieces, counted chairs, then recounted twice. I was standing at our kitchen counter, red marker in hand, trying to decide if I should seat Aunt Linda near the bar or far from it. Nathan was out picking up macarons for the dessert table. Sunlight streamed in through the windows. I should have felt joy, but I didn't, because in the far corner of the chart, one table still had no names. Parents of the bride. I left it blank, again, told myself I'd deal with it later. Then the email came. Subject: Riviera itinerary, Carter booking confirmation. I clicked it, expecting junk, but there they were, Stephen and Margaret Carter, listed under a luxury vacation package. I reread the details 3 times: ocean view suite, spa treatments, wine tastings, travel dates, Friday through Tuesday. My wedding was on Saturday. I called my mom. She answered on the second ring. "Evie, can't talk long. I'm debating shoes. You think silver sandals are too much?" "Where are you going?" I asked. "To the Riviera, remember? It's lemon season." "Mom, the wedding. My wedding." A pause. "Oh, honey, don't make this dramatic. We've talked about how overwhelming these things can be. You know your father and I aren't party people." "You said you'd be there." "Well, plans change, and we didn't want to be a burden. You've got Nathan's big family flying in. You'll be surrounded." "You think it's okay to skip your daughter's wedding for a vacation. It's not skipping. It's choosing peace. And Evelyn, you don't need us. You're strong. Always have been." She hung up with a soft, "Love you." And that was it. I didn't tell Nathan that night. He came home humming, placed a pink box on the counter, and kissed me like nothing was wrong. He asked about linens. I smiled. I nodded. I poured a glass of wine and said I was just tired. After he went to bed, I sat alone in the living room, looking at old photo albums on my laptop. Birthdays with single candles, graduations where the camera pointed at empty seats, prom night, holding a corsage no one helped me pin. I used to say they were busy. I used to defend them. Now it just looked like neglect. Then came the knock. It was late, too late for deliveries, too late for neighbors. When I opened the door, no one was there. Just a box, wrapped in soft silver paper. No note. No name. It smelled like firewood and something artificial. I carried it in, set it gently on the table. My hands were already shaking. Inside was my wedding dress. But not the one I'd chosen. This one was mine, technically, but ruined. The satin was scorched, the lace bodice melted and crumpled, the hemline black with ash. It had been burned, intentionally. Atop the wreckage, a single folded card, my mother's handwriting, 7 words. Some women mistake dreams for destinations. Underneath the gown was something else, a silk scarf, faded rose pink, my mother's favorite after the divorce. She wore it every day, curled on the couch, sipping wine and blaming everyone but herself. I hadn't seen that scarf in years. Now it was laid gently beside the destroyed dress like a final word. This wasn't careless. This wasn't subtle. This was deliberate. And I understood, finally. This wasn't about a wedding or a flight or missing a date. This was about not being wanted, not being celebrated, about someone deciding that your joy was inconvenient. I stood there, the smell of burnt fabric curling through the kitchen, and realized they hadn't just skipped the wedding. They'd set fire to the story before I could even walk in. The morning after the dress arrived, I woke up before the sun. The house was still, too still. There was a faint trace of smoke lingering in the kitchen, or maybe it was just in my mind. I poured myself a cup of coffee I wouldn't drink and sat down at the table, staring at the RSVP spreadsheet like it might suddenly make sense. That's when the message came. A text from Tessa, a friend I hadn't seen since college, but who was still on the guest list. No greeting, no emojis, just a link. "You need to see this." I tapped. It was a live stream, a wedding dress boutique, one I knew well, Thistle and Thread. I had been there 4 months ago. I had stood in front of that same mirror. I had zipped myself into those same dresses. But the girl in the video wasn't me. It was Vanessa, my sister. Hair curled in soft waves, styled the way I had planned, makeup in neutral tones, and the dress, my second choice dress. The one I had adored but set aside because Mom said it wasn't quite me. She was wearing it, standing on the platform, spinning slowly and smiling. "And when I say I do, I'm not just marrying a man," she was saying, microphone clipped to her top. "I'm marrying into freedom, into family that shows up." Laughter, applause. My hands went cold. I knew that line. I had written it weeks ago for my vows. I had only ever shown it to one person, my mother. I closed the video. My stomach was tight. My face was numb. I opened the RSVP spreadsheet again. 54 confirmed guests. I remembered each of them. I had sent personal notes, double-checked addresses, but now 24 names were suddenly marked declined. No reasons, just quiet exits. I clicked into the edit history. The IP address didn't match mine. There was only one other person I had granted access last week, just to help organize. Vanessa. "I won't change anything, I promise," she had said with a smile. "Just want to see who's coming." Now I knew what she really meant. I called Miriam Lee, the family's estate lawyer. Straightforward, blunt, the kind of woman who never sugarcoated anything. "Evelyn," she said after a pause, "you should know there's been a recent change to your family trust. Your name has been removed as a primary beneficiary." I closed my eyes. And who was added? Vanessa. Effective last Thursday. I wanted to ask why, but I already knew. "She didn't replace me by accident," I said quietly. "She was told to." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then a soft response. "I'm sorry." That night, Nathan asked if I wanted help finalizing our vows. I said yes, but not because I needed help. I needed space to start over, to write something real. I sat alone at my desk with a blank sheet of paper, and I didn't write, "Thank you, Mom and Dad, for shaping me," or "I wouldn't be here without you." I wrote, "Not everyone who brings you into this world wants to see who you become. Not everyone who shares your name shares your love. Sometimes the deepest loyalty is choosing yourself." It wasn't a vow of love. It was a vow of truth. I wasn't preparing to perform anymore. I was preparing to reclaim. The night of the rehearsal dinner, people gathered under string lights, sipping wine, laughing in linen and silk. Vanessa didn't show. Neither did my parents. No texts, no calls, no flowers. But I had stopped expecting anything. Instead of hiding, I wore the silver earrings my mother once called too loud. I wore the scarlet lipstick my father hated, and I stood tall at the welcome toast. Everyone looked to me, expecting warmth, a gentle thank you, the usual. I picked up my glass, and I said, "Not everyone at your table is in your corner, and not every silence means weakness. Sometimes silence is a choice. And today, I choose it no more." There was no applause, only the kind of silence that comes after a curtain falls, the kind of stillness that follows a truth too long buried. I sat down, my heart not racing, but steady. calm. For the first time, I didn't need to be explained. I didn't need to be softened. I was enough, without permission. That night, I didn't cry. I walked through my house barefoot. I opened every window, I turned on every light, and I wrote 3 words at the top of my final vows, for the record. The morning of the wedding was still. Not calm, not peaceful. Just still, like the hush before a thunderstorm that never arrives. The sun was soft, the air was warm, the garden was ready, everything was in its place. Except for 2 chairs. 2 white chairs under a canopy of olive branches, decorated with cream ribbon, marked parents of the bride. But no names, no guests, no family. They were empty. Behind a silk curtain, I stood alone. I could hear the murmur of guests beyond the hedges, friends, old classmates, Nathan's cousins and aunts. I heard someone whisper, "Where are Evelyn's parents?" I thought her sister would be in the bridal party. There was no answer, only soft speculation. But I didn't flinch. I let the absence speak for itself. For once, I didn't rush to fill the silence. Nathan stood beneath the archway, hands folded, smiling like it was still the happiest day of his life. Maybe it was. Maybe it could be. For both of us. The music began. No one escorted me. I walked alone, down the aisle, and not a single step felt empty. I didn't search for faces in the crowd. I didn't look for approval. I walked for myself, for the girl who once believed she had to be quiet to be loved. The ceremony began with gentle words and warmer laughter. The officiant's voice carried easily over the garden, full of practiced sweetness. Then it was time. Our vows. Nathan went first. His voice was soft, steady. He talked about how I made space in his life for both mess and meaning, how he never had to explain himself with me, how I showed up, even when others didn't. I smiled, and then it was my turn. I reached into the pocket of my bouquet wrap and unfolded a plain piece of paper. No calligraphy, no ribbon, just truth in black ink. I took a breath and spoke. I thought I would stand here today and say things like, "Thank you for shaping me. Thank you for always being there." But those words don't belong to the people who didn't come. They don't belong to the ones who had a seat, but chose something else. A ripple moved through the guests. Some lowered their eyes. Some sat stiller. I kept going. Love doesn't always leave bruises. Sometimes it leaves chairs empty. Sometimes it skips birthdays. Sometimes it burns dresses. A sharp inhale from the back row, but I didn't pause. For years, I thought if I stayed quiet, I'd be safer. That if I was good enough, small enough, soft enough, I'd finally be seen. But I learned something louder than all their silence. That being invisible to them doesn't make me invisible. I looked out at the crowd, not to provoke, but to include. So today, I don't just marry Nathan. I marry the girl who waited. I marry the woman who learned to speak. I marry the version of myself that no one clapped for, but who kept standing anyway. I folded the paper. No applause, just stillness. Then, slowly, soft hands coming together. A few at first, then more, then all. But it wasn't celebration. It was recognition, the kind of clapping you hear not because something was pretty, but because something was finally true. After the ceremony, I stood near the gate while people passed by, offering hugs, blessings, small smiles of understanding. One woman, perhaps in her 60s, approached with hesitation. She didn't say her name. She didn't say, "Congratulations." She simply opened her arms and whispered, "Thank you," for saying the thing I never could. I hugged her, not because I knew her, but because I knew exactly who she was. That day, I didn't just marry a man I loved. I married the truth. I married my voice. I married the version of me who finally believed she was enough, without needing to be softened, approved, or saved. and I never looked back. I woke up the next morning to a screen full of notifications. At first, I thought it was just post-wedding messages. Congratulations, blurry photos, thank you texts. But it wasn't that. I had 73 unread messages. My name was tagged in 4 different Facebook groups, and someone had sent me a screenshot that made my heart tighten. Vanessa had posted a video, a perfectly edited, slow-motion, sun-drenched montage of herself in a white dress, my second-choice dress, twirling under soft golden light, smiling with rehearsed vulnerability. The caption read, "Not every bride gets her day." But I showed up anyway, with the hashtags, "Your family is complicated, still standing, the other sister." The video was already getting traction. Hundreds of likes, comments pouring in, some sympathetic, others bitter, a few brutal. Why would a sister exclude her own blood from her wedding? I hope Evelyn sees this. Maybe she'll feel something now. Vanessa, you deserved better. I scrolled and scrolled, my thumb numb, my stomach tight. There were kind comments too, people defending me, reminding others that stories online are just fragments, that no one knows the full truth. But the truth? It didn't feel like a sword in my hand, it felt like a weight on my chest. Nathan brought me tea, like he always did. He saw my face before I said a word. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I probably should." He nodded. Then he added, "You don't owe anyone a performance, not even now." That sentence wrapped around me like a blanket, because deep down I already knew. The pressure wasn't to fight back, it was to stay free. Still, something inside me stirred. Not rage, not revenge. Something else. Clarity. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and created a blank blog post. Title, "What I Didn't Say in My Vows." And I began to write. I didn't tell the whole story at my wedding. I didn't say what it felt like to be replaced, or what it meant to be erased not once but again and again, in small, quiet ways that never made headlines, only scars. I didn't say that my sister wore my dress, quoted my words, and smiled into a camera like truth was a costume. I didn't say that love doesn't always look like flowers and hugs. Sometimes love looks like not going back, not shrinking to fit. I didn't say that silence is a language, and sometimes it's the only one people choose to understand. I paused. Then I wrote the line I needed to read myself. You can forgive someone without letting them back in the room. I clicked publish. No hashtags, no filters, no dramatic formatting, just the truth. And I walked away from my screen. By evening, the post had gone viral. It was shared over 11,000 times. My inbox flooded with messages, strangers writing to tell me they had been the black sheep, the scapegoat, the one who was always too much or not enough. Some wrote paragraphs, others just sent "thank you" or "me too." One message stood out. "I watched your wedding vows on someone's shaky video. I cried in my car. I'm 62, and I finally understood why I stopped calling my sister. You gave me language I didn't have." I didn't respond to Vanessa's post. I didn't argue. I didn't clear the air. I didn't repost receipts or screenshots or family drama because the air was already clear. Finally. And I had nothing to prove. A few days later, I received a message request from Vanessa. I stared at the screen, read it once. "You really made yourself the hero, huh? Just remember who picked you up from college when Dad forgot. Hope the attention was worth it." I didn't reply. Instead, I muted her account. That wasn't cruelty. That was grace with a boundary. And for the first time in my life, I gave myself permission not to engage. That night, I sat in the living room with Nathan, our hands intertwined, watching the light shift across the hardwood floor. "I think I want to keep writing," I said. "Then write," he said. "Your story isn't done." I looked out the window, where the garden lights from our wedding still hung, swaying gently. Maybe my story wasn't about family after all. Maybe it was about survival. Maybe it was about how sometimes your voice isn't just yours. It's a mirror, and when you finally use it, other people see themselves. It seems like I can't do more advanced data analysis right now. Please try again later. 3 weeks after the wedding, I got the email. It was from a woman named Camille, a therapist and writer who ran a women's retreat in upstate New York. She said she'd read my blog twice. She asked if I would consider coming as a guest speaker, just a 1-hour session. It doesn't have to be polished, she wrote. It just has to be true. I didn't reply for 2 days, not because I wasn't interested, but because I wasn't sure if I belonged. I wasn't a professional speaker. I wasn't a therapist. I didn't have credentials or a platform. I had pain and a story that, apparently, echoed. Nathan encouraged me to go. You don't have to tell them everything, he said, just enough to make them feel less alone. So I said yes. The retreat was held in a converted barn surrounded by pine trees and gravel paths. There were mason jars filled with wildflowers and candles in mismatched glass. Women of all ages wandered around in layers of cotton and quiet. Some carried grief in their hands. Others wore it behind their eyes. But no one said the word broken. That was the first thing I noticed. I arrived the night before my talk and sat quietly in the back row of the first panel. 3 women on stage, speaking about family trauma, boundary setting, identity loss after caregiving. One woman said, I didn't realize I'd been mothering my mother until I moved out and felt free for the first time. Another said, grief can exist for people who are still alive. Everyone nodded, including me. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed in the tiny cabin they gave me and stared at the page I'd printed, the blog post that started it all. I brought it in case I froze. But now I wondered, was it enough? Was truth still truth if you stopped short of the sharpest part? The next morning, I wore a navy blue sweater, the kind my mother would have said washed me out. I walked to the hall with the wood beams and folding chairs and hearts that had been cracked open more than once. Camille introduced me with quiet grace. She didn't come here to tell us how to live, she said. She came here to remember how she survived. And then she handed me the mic. For a moment, I stood in silence, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to feel what it meant to say it. Then I unfolded the paper. What I didn't say in my vows was that I still looked for my parents in the crowd, even though I knew they wouldn't be there. A few women nodded. What I didn't say is that sometimes love teaches you what absence really sounds like. That silence doesn't just sting, it rewrites you. I paused, and then I let go of the paper. And what I never said, not online, not even to myself, is this. I was never hard to love. I was just inconvenient to people who only knew how to love conditionally. The room was still. No rustling, no coughs, just breath, held and shared. After the session, I stepped outside. One by one, women came to me. Some didn't speak. They just hugged me like I had said something they'd buried for years. One woman, gray streak in her braid, eyes the color of cedar bark, took my hands. You gave me permission, she said. Permission? She nodded. To remember the parts of me I left behind just to keep the peace. That night, I sat by the window in my cabin with a notebook open. I didn't know what I was writing yet, but I wrote a title. Not About Blame, a memoir of quiet survival. I didn't need to expose anyone. I didn't need to shout. I just needed to name what had been unnamed, to build something from the echoes. Nathan called that night. How did it go? He asked. It felt like holding hands with strangers in the dark, I said. And somehow, I didn't feel alone anymore. The next morning, I joined a group session where women shared 6-word stories, tiny distillations of entire lifetimes. A woman in her 60s shared, I left and that saved me. Another said, "I forgive, but I won't return." When it was my turn, I whispered mine, no longer begging silence to protect me. As I packed to leave, Camille handed me a small notebook. Inside, women had written thank you notes. No names, just sentences. "You spoke, and I heard myself. You reminded me I'm allowed to take up space. I'm going to write again. For me." I held that notebook like it was more sacred than any family album I had ever owned, because in those pages, I belonged. And I wasn't a daughter begging to be seen. I was a woman who had found her voice and gave it away like light. It had been 2 weeks since the retreat, 2 weeks since I stood in that barn in upstate New York and read words I hadn't dared say out loud, not even to myself. Since then, I'd been home, back in my quiet corner of the world, a warm cup of tea always within reach, the garden finally blooming again. I'd opened a new document titled, "Not About Blame, a Memoir." But I hadn't written a word. It wasn't fear. It was something deeper than that. Hesitation wrapped in reverence. I knew that once I started, there would be no turning back, no softening the past, no protecting people who hadn't protected me. It would be permanent. And somehow, that terrified me more than silence ever had. That morning, I sat at my desk in a cotton robe, staring at the blinking cursor. Nathan was already gone. He had left me a note by the kettle that said, "Write it, even if it scares you." I smiled, then sighed, then wrote 4 words. "This isn't about revenge." And that's when the mail arrived. I wasn't expecting anything, just the usual. Credit card offers, grocery ads, maybe a thank you card from a cousin who attended the wedding. But among the envelopes was one I hadn't seen in years, cream-colored, thick. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. My mother's cursive, elegant and overly neat, as if written for someone she wanted to impress. My chest tightened. I didn't open it right away. I set it beside my tea and let it stare at me for an hour, maybe more. The last time she wrote to me, I was 17. She had slipped a note under my door after a fight. 3 sentences long. None of them included the word sorry. When I finally opened it, I expected, I don't know, an apology? A denial? A justification? What I found was stranger than any of those. It began, "Dear Evelyn, I've been thinking of you lately. I saw a tree the other day that reminded me of the one in the backyard when you were little." A tree, not the wedding, not the vows, not the blog, the burned dress, or the missing RSVP. Just a tree. She continued, "I suppose we all do the best we can with what we have. Maybe one day we'll both understand things differently." No signature, just her name. Margaret, not Mom. Not love you, not even take care. Just Margaret. I read it 3 times, then once more, aloud. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't warm. It was the emotional equivalent of lukewarm water, neither quenching nor scalding. I could feel the part of me, the old part, that wanted to take it as a peace offering, to respond with something equally vague, to leave the door ajar. But I'd left too many doors open before, and they'd only ever let the cold in. So I didn't call. I didn't write back immediately. I went back to my desk, and I started writing again, not to her, but to me. When I was a child, I thought love looked like approval, like compliments, like being easy to handle. Now, I know love looks like presence. It looks like showing up, not because it's convenient, but because it matters. I've spent years loving people who treated me like a guest in my own life. This book isn't about them. It's about the girl who stayed quiet for too long and the woman who doesn't need to anymore. I paused, saved the document, then printed 1 page, the introduction, and sat down to write something else. A letter, this time, to her. Short, honest, and final. Dear Margaret, I received your letter. I'm choosing not to continue this version of our relationship, the one where things are implied but never said. I no longer participate in patterns that reward avoidance. If you ever want to speak honestly, with accountability and no performance, I'll listen. Until then, I wish you peace. Evelyn. I didn't cry. I folded it, slipped it into an envelope, and walked it to the mailbox. I stood there for a moment before letting it go. Not to start something new, but to end something old. When I returned home, I tucked a copy of that letter into the back of my manuscript folder, not out of bitterness, but because my story deserved every line of truth. And now, it had one more. It seems like I can't do more advanced data analysis right now. Please try again later. It took me 3 more months to finish the manuscript, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to say it carefully, without bitterness, without self-erasure, without hiding behind anyone else's version of events. The final chapter ended not with an exclamation point, but with a sentence that felt like breath. This story didn't make me brave. Telling it did. When I typed the last word, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just closed the laptop and let the stillness settle around me like a soft quilt, a quiet kind of victory. A week later, I had 2 copies printed and bound, soft cover, matte finish, simple typeface. On the cover, just the title, Not About Blame, a memoir by Evelyn Carter. 1 copy stayed on my shelf. The other had somewhere else to go. The public library in our town was a squat stone building tucked between the courthouse and an overgrown dogwood tree. It hadn't changed much since I was a child. Same creaky floors, same dusty windows, same smell of ink and possibility. I used to come here after school, long before smartphones and curated noise. I'd hide in the biography section, curled up beside the radiator, reading about other people's lives like I was trying to borrow courage from strangers. It was the first place I felt seen, even if no one actually saw me. I walked through the front doors holding my copy of the book. The librarian at the front desk, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes and purple glasses, looked up and smiled. Need help finding something? No, I said. I'd like to donate something. She glanced at the book in my hands, then read the title, then read it again. We have a local voices shelf, she said. It's small, but people really do browse it. She took the book gently, as if it might be breakable. Thank you, she added. Would you like it cataloged with your name or anonymously? I hesitated, then shook my head. My name. Please. I didn't leave right away. I wandered the aisles for a while, fingers brushing over spines of books I once loved. I passed the chair I used to curl up in, still there, only more worn. When I returned to the front, the librarian had already placed the book on the wooden shelf near the window. A small sign read, Local Authors, Real Stories. My book was at the center, just sitting there. No fanfare, no spotlight, but it was there. Permanent. I stood for a moment, not proud exactly, settled, rooted, real. Then a voice behind me, "Excuse me?" I turned. A young woman, early 20s maybe, stood a few feet away holding the book in her hands. She had a brown cardigan, messy bun, and eyes that had seen more than her age should allow. I saw the title and she trailed off, eyes searching mine. It kind of hit me. I nodded, unsure what to say. She smiled awkwardly, pressing the book to her chest. I don't know who wrote it, but I just needed to say thank you. Just reading the back cover made me feel like I'm not crazy. I opened my mouth, then closed it, because this wasn't about me, not anymore. I smiled. I think you're going to like it. She nodded. You've read it? I know the story, I said softly. She didn't press further, just held the book like it might anchor her to the floor. Then she whispered, mostly to herself, Not everyone at your table is in your corner. I think I needed to hear that. And then she walked away, toward the window, toward the chair, toward the place I used to sit when I was her. I didn't leave right away. I stood there for a little while longer, watching her from a quiet distance, not intruding, just witnessing. And for the first time, I understood. I didn't need my family to see me anymore, because I saw myself, fully, without apology, without shrinking, without waiting for permission, and I had left behind a mirror for someone else, just like I once needed. Outside, the air was soft. Autumn had started whispering through the trees. I walked to my car without looking back. I didn't need to. The story was in good hands now. This wasn't a story of bitterness. It was a story of returning, not to people, but to self, of choosing truth, even when silence was safer, of setting the table for love, even when the chairs stayed empty. If you've ever been overlooked, replaced, or made to feel too much, let Evelyn's journey remind you, you don't need history to define your worth. You don't need permission to speak. And love, real love, doesn't punish you for having a voice. It listens. Thank you for watching. If Evelyn's story echoed something in you, please like, share, and subscribe. And always remember, you matter. Your truth belongs. And your voice is never too late.